I've always loved fashion. It's a way of expression, an art form that allows for identity development and pride, even for evolution. We all wear clothes. We all say something to the world in what we choose to clothe ourselves in. I came to appreciate fashion more deeply working as a model. But I also became more conscious of the fast pace of fashion, of the hidden costs behind our clothes. I became increasingly uncomfortable promoting it all. Fast fashion, thoughtless fashion, unjust fashion. So, I decided to shift paths. I began working only with ethical brands to produce photo shoots, while helping others make kinder choices. At the same time, I began fostering orphaned lambs, those who had come from the meat and wool industries. This is how Willow and Claude came into my life. They are how I decided to look more deeply into the knitwear we keep warm with in winter. After so many nights of bottle feeding little lambs, after so many cuddles, I wanted to combine my passion for fairly made clothes with something I could do for them, or for those like them. A lot of knitwear is made of wool, and wool, of course, comes from sheep.
Men and mobs from the paddocks and the plains, beyond the hills and over the river. Men from Gundagai and Cootamundra, bringing in the mobs for the shearing.
Wool is thought of with a lot of love here in Australia, and we're the top exporter of it all across the world. When most of us think of where wool comes from, we think of fluffy sheep in rolling green pastures, grazing happily, living well. We think of a caring farmer tending lovingly to their flock, and of the iconic shearers who harvest wool. Australia, we're told, was built on a sheep's back. There is, however, what I found to be a dark side to wool. Every winter in Australia, 10 to 15 million newborn lambs die in the first 48 hours of their lives, mostly due to exposure, starvation, and neglect. I was shocked when I first learned that lambs are routinely and legally mutilated without any pain relief in ways more distressing than you can imagine. What worried me more than any of this, though, was finding out that the wool industry is a slaughter industry. It turns out, wool and meat production are entirely intertwined, with all wool-bearing sheep being considered dual-purpose by the industry, even the iconic merino. Some sheep are shorn before they're killed as lambs, while others are kept for wool growing, shorn regularly for several years, and unfortunately, extreme shearing cruelty has been endlessly documented. Only halfway into their natural lifespan, a sheep's wool ages and brittles, just like our hair does. Lower quality is lower profits, so these sheep are cast for age and killed. What's more, while 30 million lambs and sheep are slaughtered every year in Australia, hundreds of thousands more are sent on grueling live export ships. Everyone ends up at a slaughterhouse. The only question is when. We all need to make choices about what we want to support when we dress ourselves. I decided that this is not something I want to support. Today, more and more people are choosing the same and buying and designing fashion free from animals. I decided to bring more options into the world that kept sheep like Willow and Claude safe. I decided I would make my own knitwear as ethically as I possibly could. I'd also use it to support more projects for good. My first thoughts were on the raw material. If it wasn't wool, then what else was out there? I found a lot of alternative fibres made of synthetic materials, acrylic, polyester. They're produced from fossil fuels, and millions of tiny microplastics are released and head into our waterways every time we wash them. They're far from nature's pick. So I knew I wanted to make knitwear out of plants. That way, anything I made would quickly biodegrade without polluting the earth. But I didn't know what plant was most ethical or sustainable. I looked at hemp, bamboo, organic cotton. I read about horrific human rights violations on some overseas fibre farms. forced labour, child labour, misleading labelling and false certifications of supposedly organic fibres. That was when it dawned on me. It makes the most sense to support Australian farmers. They're right here, battling drought, bushfires and floods, growing the crops to feed and clothe us. I'd save carbon emissions sourcing fibre from home, and best of all, I'd be able to learn everything about the ethics and sustainability of the farm. I'd be able to go and see it for myself. So after months of research, I decided that I was going to work with Australian plant farmers, more specifically, cotton farmers. But despite the theoretical knowledge I'd gathered, I didn't know just how much work goes into growing the cotton in my underwear, my jeans, or my t-shirt. I wanted to speak to someone with hands-on experience. I feel very lucky to have connected with Renee and visited her farm in Emerald, Queensland. Renee is a cotton farmer and an advisor helping other cotton farmers work sustainably with the land. The only animals on her farm are her dogs and cat. She's also one of the most energetic and friendly people I've ever met.
My grandparents were farmers on both sides of the family. I spent much of my childhood growing up working on their farm during school holidays. It was something I really loved from a really young age, and I really enjoyed spending time with my granddad. He had sugarcane, grew tomatoes, had beef cattle, and so I spent most of the time in the cropping and driving tractors and planting with him. So it was really special part of my childhood.
Renee's cotton farm stretches across 500 hectares of land. When I visited her, 90 hectares of cotton was planted.
So this here is a fully irrigated cotton field, and it's not far off being harvested, so we'll probably begin early February. So we do a rotation of different crops. It's really important for soil health, for your weed management, for your disease management. We really have the potential to grow any sorts of crops. It's beautiful, heavy cracking clay soils. So yeah, we could grow wheat, sorghum, chickpeas, popcorn.
Rotational farming of plants helps the soil stay fertile, well-structured and nutritious. Nitrogen-fixing crops like chickpeas are especially important because cotton needs nitrogen to thrive. These food crops fix and release nitrogen into the soil, acting as a natural fertiliser.
This was my winter crop, my winter chickpea crop, and it was harvested in October, and you can see here all the stubble residue is left over. In a really hot, dry year like we're having at the moment, it's really important. It's sort of good sun protection for the soil. It stops the not that we've got any moisture in the soil, but it would normally prevent moisture loss. Stops that soil erosion through wind.
Another plant grown on Renee's farm is pigeon pea. To her, or more specifically to bugs, it's a refuge crop, one which protects cotton and its pest-resistant traits.
The point of pigeon pea is to be flowering throughout the season that we're growing cotton, and it flowers indeterminately, so there will always be attractive flower pods, flowers and potting for the Heliothis caterpillar to come and feed on.
So it's basically making a home that's better for them than the cotton, so that the cotton stays protected from them.
Yeah, so they will like the cotton. However, this is a really attractive crop for the caterpillar. I grow a genetically engineered crop with the BT protein in it. BT is a naturally occurring soil bacteria that's been put into the plant, and it's a pest-resistant crop.
BT is a natural, biological bacteria. It's actually sprayed on top of cotton plants grown in organic systems. In Australia, this BT protein is packaged up inside the plant itself, which means it doesn't need to be sprayed for bugs anywhere near as much. Running the farm this way makes for a far happier environment compared to the Australian cotton farms of about 2 decades ago, now that cotton farmers are using 97% less insecticides.
So one of the benefits of the GM cotton that I grow is that it's pest resistant, which means that basically I don't need to apply pesticides for the Heliothis caterpillar. So it's already built into the plant, and the chances of needing to spray are sort of 0 to none for that particular pest. Sometimes we may get secondary pest insects such as aphids or whitefly, but that's generally quite late in the season, and by that time we've got such a good build-up of beneficial insects because we haven't needed to use any chemistry during the season that they will generally control themselves with the beneficials moving in.
All of these practices focus heavily on soil health, and for good reason. Fertile soil is essential to life here for us all, and the soil here is pretty special. Some parts of Renee's farmland are dedicated to wildlife corridors, untouched nature that encourages biodiversity. Even the recycling dam, used to capture and reuse irrigation water running off the end of the field, is a home to wild animals. To produce the same amount of Australian-grown fibre, wool requires about 367 times more land than cotton. The Wilderness Society reports that over 90% of land clearing is for the pasture which cattle and sheep graze. This all made me realise the importance of more land-efficient, plant-based agriculture, which would allow more space for renewable energy farms, for carbon farming, for rewilding, and for the making of homes for native animals and plants. Just like people talk about the methane released from the wool industry, people talk a lot about cotton's water use. While in some places, even in Australia, cotton is just rain-fed, irrigated cotton does use a lot of water. But so does growing many crops, not to mention animal agriculture. Cotton farmers also don't get access to water until communities, the environment, animal farmers and fruit tree farmers have first.
Well, we can't grow a crop if there's no water.
Yeah.
And we don't grow a crop if there's no water. Any crop that I grow on my farm relies on water being in the Fairburn Dam and having an allocation to grow that.
Mm-hmm.
It's been a really hot, dry year, and like most of New South Wales, Queensland's also in drought. And unfortunately, the Fairburn Dam is really quite low. It's less than 10%. So I have no allocation from the dam this year. Unfortunately, with the hot, dry weather and no rainfall, we've actually pulled 23 hectares out.
I assume that is stressful.
I guess it's just how it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. If it doesn't rain next year or the year after, there's no income on the farm.
Yeah.
So that's stressful.
Yeah. Renee's farm is certified under the Better Cotton Initiative and the MyBMP, or Best Management Practices, an Australian cotton certification that demands 300 best practices covering worker safety and rights, biodiversity, soil health and more. Over 80% of Australian cotton farmers participate in MyBMP.
There's lots of different areas on the farm that's covered within that, and we get audited by an independent auditor. So not only does it cover sustainable environments on farm, but it also ensures like our workplace health and safety. For us on this farm, it's really important that our workers are looked after, so they receive fair working conditions and fair working wages.
Once Renee's cotton is picked, it's ginned, separating the seeds from the fibres. These seeds can be turned into an oil used in cooking, while the fibre is sent down from Emerald to Geelong. Sadly, there are no commercial spinning mills left in Australia for cotton, but Dr. Stuart Gordon and his team at the CSIRO agreed to spin their magic for me. The CSIRO operates the last short staple cotton spinning mill in Australia, used for science. If we could spin again in Australia, we could reduce carbon emissions and ensure greater transparency, fair living wages and work safety in the production of what keeps us nice and snuggly.
My name's Stu Gordon. I'm a Senior Principal Research Scientist at CSIRO Ag and Foods Business Unit. I look after the cotton space largely in the post-harvest area. It's so well adapted for our use as a covering and clothing. It's unbelievable. It's already separated as a fibre. It doesn't need to be cleaned too much before we spin it. It has a wax layer that preserves the fibre and makes sure the fibre carries through the mechanical processes of spinning and protects it so it doesn't break any further. It's lovely and white. It's pretty flexible, pretty rugged and high premium. Yeah. So cotton spinning, the process of turning your fibre harvested into yarn, is an old process. I think the first spinning processes probably came out of Lancashire in the 1700s. The process itself, essentially you take the bale of cotton from the gin comes into the mill directly. It doesn't need any further processing to start in the mill. It's opened, and part of that opening process is a cleaning process. And then from there, from the opening and cleaning, it goes through carding. And carding starts to separate the fibres from their bundles, their compressed bundles, into individual fibres, and it starts to align the fibres. That alignment continues through the drawing and combing processes, and then most Australian cottons are spun on the ring spinning system, which is the oldest system and produces the sort of finest, softest, strongest yarns. And for that purpose, from comb sliver or carded sliver, it needs to be converted to roving, and then the roving bobbin, and then the roving is the last sort of intermediate before spun yarn. The great thing about cotton is that the fact that it has a wax layer, and this wax layer lubricates it all the way through the spinning process, and it means that you don't need to touch that no water really comes in, no wet processing comes into the spinning mill at all, unlike, say, for example, wool or even hemp.
Once cotton is spun into a yarn, it needs to be twisted into a different yarn, one that's a bit thicker, more cosy and ready to be knitted. A not too long drive from the CSIRO took me to Industrial Yarns, where this process happens. 3 yarn cones are combined into one that's triple the thickness. While this cotton is going to stay undyed, making it the most sustainable choice, and a beautiful one at that, some of the cotton is turning forest green, grey and brown. That's happening just 20 odd minutes away at Leading Textiles. The dyes are Blue Sign and Urcotex approved, protecting the planet. They contain no heavy metals that would impact the biodegradation process. That's another thing I didn't know. Biodegradable materials could become not so, just depending on how they're dyed. Next comes the knitting. We need to consider who makes our clothes, because only 2% of garment workers around the world are paid a fair, living wage. Mostly women of colour make our clothes, so this is both a feminist and racial justice issue. When it came to finding ethical knitwear production in Australia, I found my way to a machine. This is a whole garment knitting machine. It can reduce yarn waste by just under 30% compared to conventional knitwear production, and it can knit fast. All it needs is a clever brain behind it. A brain like Patricia's. Patricia runs Knit Melbourne, and she works with a small team to code the machine to knit exactly what we want it to. This facility is Ethical Clothing Australia accredited, ensuring that Patricia and everyone else involved is treated and paid as they deserve for their work. It took a lot of time and digging to work out how to make knitwear in a supply chain that was totally transparent and that told a story I was proud to tell. A supply chain full of fluffy plants and friendly people, of whom I got to meet everyone. It was harder than picking a yarn online made from something I hadn't thought much about, that I didn't know the origin of or the hurt it may have caused. It was more difficult than drop shipping pre-made garments or paying next to nothing for them to be made somewhere I had never stepped foot inside. But this is the responsibility of anyone in the fashion industry. It's not right to produce and sell or to buy clothing that we don't know anything about. Clothing that could be funding things out of alignment with our values. Those choices need to be informed, transparent, better for the planet and everyone living on it. I've always loved fashion. It's a way of expression, an art form that allows for identity development and pride, for revolution. We all wear clothes, and we all say something to the world in what we choose to clothe ourselves in. I hope that something is kind.